Good morning, grade 11, and welcome back to a new lecture of the distance learning about the same piece of poetry, On to Julia by Norma McCaig. Last sessions we went on stanzas 1 and 2, but today inshallah we are going to go over stanza 3 and 4 about the summary, and we are going to pick some of the themes and also some of the analytical figures of speech. But before going through the poem, through the summary, we are going to listen to the poem first together, the description of his aunt and what was involved in the first and second stanzas. So now listen to the poem, and afterwards we are going to go over the summary and some of the figures of speech. Okay, listen now.
Hers was the only house where I've lain at night, in the absolute darkness of a box bed, listening to crickets being friendly. She was and water flouncing into them. She was wind pouting wetly round house ends. She was brown eggs, black skirts, and a keeper of threepenny bits in a teapot.
Okay, here are the third and fourth stanzas, and they are very rich with the summary and the extended description of his aunt and what he felt about her. So I will start with the summary first. In stanza 3, we see clearly that the language barrier was surmounted by an instinctive bond between the speaker and his aunt. So here I can say he shapes the trouble found between him and his aunt, and how strong was it, how great was it, and as I said before, it never prevented him to show love or prevented his aunt to show love to him. She was caring very much for him, and she helped him to be safe and secured in her craft. And also he felt in love with her. He loved her very much, and also he felt secured with her. However, they couldn't communicate with each other. As a result, the young boy feels safe and secure in the dark island of the box bed in Aunt Julia's home. So here he explains that he was very secured and safe in her house. However, they couldn't communicate with each other because of the language. As I said before, she used to speak Gaelic language, but he used to speak English, and both of them couldn't understand or even talk to each other. It is enclosed and comforting, and he vividly remembers lying in the absolute darkness, listening to crickets being friendly. And I want to mention that he used here the pronoun hers to say that, or to remind himself that he was listening to these crickets or things like that, or these sounds in her house, in her life. So now he's remembering that after her death. Gaining the affection he feels for her is evident in the decision to open this stanza with the pronoun hers, emphasizing her significance to him. She was very important to him. She was very significant to him because he was feeling very secure and safe in her house, and he loved her very much, and he can regret. Now he's regretting not being in touch or not being able to communicate with her in her life because of the language. He couldn't even learn how to speak to her. In stanza 4, McCaig employs personification to compare his aunt both with the elements he associates with this landscape, the wind and water, and within the objects and garments that for him are most evocative of her. So in the fourth stanza, he was just comparing his aunt to the elements of the nature, just like the water, the wind, and the air, or the landscape, the nature at all. He was comparing his aunt because she was very important to him, and he was comparing her to the nature as a kind of love. She appears to him to be vivid, larger than life, and is so connected with the landscape itself that she becomes a part of it. It's a very important thing. Just like if you love someone very much, you will relate this one to the nature around you. Also, if you were enjoying the nature with him or with the company of him, after his death or after he goes on or he goes away, you will feel passionate, very passionate to this person. You will relate these elements of the nature to him all the time. So the observations are those of a child fascinated by both the curious and the ordinary. It means that he was enjoying the time by the company of his aunt and also the nature. He was enjoying the nature by the company of his aunt. In the poet's memory, Julia becomes intertwined with the natural forces of wind and rain. In the description of the winds pouring wildly round house ends, at the same time, he remembers her through a series of mundane domestic objects. So he was relating everything in the nature around him to his aunt, his lovely aunt, as a kind of enjoyment and entertainment. She was buckets and water flouncing into them, and also brown eggs, black skirts, and a keeper of 3-penny bits. Again, the impression conveyed is of a woman in constant motion. Constant motion means she was moving constantly, continuously in front of him. She was very active in finishing her work and working by her hands. As I said before, that her work was physically demanding. She used to move around him or in front of him to finish her work. That transferred the epithet used in the flouncing water. Epithet here means the metaphor. Used in the flouncing water gives a description of the deliberate, vigorous way she moved. It means that she was very active. She was moving very quickly to be able to finish her work in a short time. These metaphors seem to extend beyond merely describing Julia as an individual in order to use her as a symbol associated with or representative of the particular landscape, lifestyle, and culture of this geographical area. So here he was just comparing his aunt and making a lot of metaphors by comparing his aunt to the elements of the nature around him, the sounds of the crickets and the wind, the water, the landscape, and things around that. It shows how lovely was his aunt and how great was his love to her. Aunt Julia then epitomizes means summarizes the specific way of life of the crofting islanders who work the land in a harsh, unforgiving climate. Despite the arduousness of this lifestyle, means that it was aggressive, it was hard after her death, there is a pride and honesty in it. If you see that the traditional life is very hard to the people, is very tough to the people, but otherwise there is a pride and honesty in it because of his aunt, which the speaker obviously admires. He admires the countryside, he admires the traditional life because of his aunt. He was in love, in a great love with his aunt. He loved her very much and he loved the nature around her. Julia could even be taken to symbolize the land and elements themselves in this part of the world, difficult at times, yet ultimately providing an honest, noble, self-sufficient existence. Here he is just referring to the description, or how important was the description of his aunt to him, to show that he missed her very much and he missed her motions around him very much. And it was very important to him to communicate with her during her life. But it was very difficult to communicate with her because of the language, as I said before. Thanks a million for watching this video, and this is the summary for stanzas 3 and 4. I hope everything was sufficient and beneficial to you. Just watch it and wait for the following stanza, with the last stanza, stanza 5. Stanza 5 to be able to summarize it all and use it in the analytical essay. Thanks a million, and to be continued inshallah with the stanza 5. Bye bye.